But he opened up this book and he started reading from the top, okay? And he called it the best in the business. And what it was about you are professionals now. You get paid for what you do. That means you have to respect the organization, and you have to, what you do matters to this organization, but you also have to have respect for yourself. But not only want to have, think as a professional, I want you to be a passionate professional. I want you to be a passionate professional. And so I stuck to that, and I luckily got my big start on Monday Night Football. Threw 4 touchdown passes. I ran for 2 touchdowns. It was a great night against the Chicago Bears on Monday Night Football, and it kind of launched me into my career. Man, it was like no looking back after that. It was wonderful. I mean, as I said, I went to the playoffs twice, won the division. We missed the Super Bowl by no, I'm just kidding. If Eddie Murray would have made that field, oh my God, no. I'm just kidding. So anyway, I went on and I started for the next 5-6 years, right? 6 years, I think it was. And so in the middle of the 80s, I'm smoothing along, I'm doing pretty well. And then I started getting beat up, started getting hit, started getting injured. I started getting pushed out on the injury reserve or missing a year, whatever it would be. See, but the injury stuff is not that big of a deal because it's part of the game. You understand that, right? The hard part, though, is if you have to have surgery and you have to sit out and trying to get yourself back in shape, get yourself back into the team, and then get your starting job back. And that's difficult to do. Not only physically, but it also takes a mental toll. And so here was, as 7 years into the career, and in the last 3 years, I ended up with like 7 surgeries. Elbow, thumb, foot, ankle. The worst one was I had a guy come across and hit me from San Francisco, and he hit me and laid on my leg, and I heard it snap. Right? I was in shock, so I didn't feel it. But when I looked up and I saw the defensive end, Charles Haley, Hall of Fame guy, Charles Haley. Now, I saw him backing up, and he had fear written all over his face. And I looked at, I'll trip over it sooner or later. I looked at him, I go, what's wrong with, and then I heard 60,000 people go, oh. And I looked down, and my foot was on backwards. And the first thing that popped in my head wasn't so much about my foot. It was like, oh gosh, here I go again. Surgery and trying to get my job back again. And so they did, they put a plate, screws in there, put my foot back on straight, fixed all the ligaments and tendons and everything else. And so coming back into this was my 10th year in the league, trying to get my starting job back. I wasn't the same person now that I was, coming into the league and everything else. It had taken its toll. And now I'd gone through divorce. This is my 10th year in the league, gone through divorce. My wife had moved back with my 2 kids back out to Utah, and just didn't feel quite the same. But it's okay, I got my starting job back, and I got it against Minnesota. So I go to Minnesota, and I'm ready to go. I'm trying to get my identity back. I'm the starter. And it started off okay. I threw a touchdown pass, okay, and then they started blitzing me. I couldn't really run very well anymore. Couldn't really shoot the ball anymore as well. And but I threw 2 more touchdown passes, but they were both for Minnesota. So they returned them for touchdowns. And when that happened, they pulled me in the 3rd quarter and they benched me, and then they cut me the next day. So here I was, 32 years old, and my career's over. And it was mid-season when it happened. And what do I do now? This is basically all I've known since about this big. This is it. That identity is so wrapped up in that, and and what you do and your worth and everything else is wrapped up in that. So I didn't know what to do. I took some time off. Ended up getting engaged and then remarried. Started a business, and when I started the business, I knew nothing about the business. But you know what? I'm gonna throw everything I got into it just like I did football, and I did. And sure enough, this thing started climbing. In about 5 years or so, I was doing really, really, really well. The thing is, that's when it hit me. When all of a sudden thing was doing really, really well, and that identity shattering thing, like, who am I? Is this it? Is this all there is? There's no more adrenaline. This is going to be my life from this point forward. Even though I had a wonderful wife. Now we've got 2 kids with her. And so I started going downhill. And I started trying to replace that adrenaline with other things, of course, like being really risky, boating, got a pilot's license. I mean, anything I can try and think of, water ski, snow ski, anything I can think of. And of course, alcohol and stuff like that as well, right? And, but it didn't work. And so as I went downhill, I wasn't doing very well. The business started falling apart, ended up in a lawsuit, and the things as it fell apart, it was, I feel pretty worthless right about now. And as I started feeling that way, it didn't get any better. I quit leaving the house. My wife was really concerned now. What are we going to do? The business is falling apart. And I told her, I'll save the business. I'll fly down to Arizona and pick up a new product, and away we go. But I wasn't doing well, and so my wife told me she would drive me to the airport and make sure I get there okay. While we're driving down the freeway, I-75, heading towards Metro, it just hit me. And she's driving, and I grabbed a piece of paper, and I wrote, "I'm sorry, I love you." I handed it to her. She kind of looked at it, and she looked at me, and I opened the door, and I jumped out of the car. I hit the pavement going about 70 miles an hour. The cars behind me luckily didn't hit me. They swerved, so they didn't run me over. I'm a bloody pulp on the side of the highway. I don't remember any of this from that point forward. My wife said it was a commotion and a half. But what I remember is waking up in the hospital, and I'm bandaged up. They had to do a face peel. They had to do some grafts and stuff. But I wake up, and here it is. A psychiatrist is sitting next to my bed, okay? And my parents had flown in from California, and they're sitting at the foot of my bed. That's how long I was out. So it's like, I wake up to hearing this. Well, we can put a hold on Eric. We'll put him in the psychiatric ward, and we'll do a full evaluation, and we'll figure out what's going on with Eric. And I heard that, and the first thing that popped in my head was, I remember when I played, there was a guy by the name of Mike Tomczak, who was a quarterback for Chicago. And I don't know if you remember this or not, but I remember distinctly. One day I pick up the paper, and I'm in the locker room, and I read, Mike Tomczak seeks psychologist to deal with Coach Ditka. And I went, what a wuss. Are you kidding me? What a wuss. He can't deal with the coach. I mean, he's got to go see a psychologist. That's how I felt then, right? That's how stigma was. And so that's what I hear in my head. Nah, that's not me. Nope, 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 nope. You see, so that's not going to happen. So the psychiatrist left. Parents, I told them if they do try and put a hold on me or something, then I'll never talk to them again. And so they didn't. So anyway, so I got out of the hospital. The paper says Hipple falls out of car. My wife had taken the note. Nobody knows that I actually jumped. And I went around for like 3 years. Hey, Eric, you followed any cars lately? Not today. It's like, but it's okay with me because it was kind of a running joke, kind of fun thing. Did your wife kick you out? That was it. Okay, that's more believable than I actually jumped, right? And so that's how I went on for these next 3 years. The problem with not learning anything, not getting treatment myself, and not having any knowledge whatsoever what was behind that, was when my 15-year-old son started high school, and he had been living with my ex-wife, then living with me, then living with my ex-wife. He's going through transitions of his own. And this year he's with me, and he starts in high school. Starts off doing extremely well. Makes friends, doing great. Grades are doing well. Becomes captain of his freshman basketball team, so he's doing good, doing well. But then again, after the holidays go, and we start heading into spring, I can see a change in him. And all of a sudden his demeanor. And his grades started dropping. And he started telling me he doesn't really want to go to school anymore. And I'm going, what's going on, Jeff? I said, is somebody bullying you? Is that what's happening, Jeff, at school? Is that what's happening? He said, no, Dad, I just don't feel good. Okay. Same thing goes on. Jeff, is it one of the teachers? Is that what you're having a problem with? Is that what's happening? No, Dad, I just don't feel good. That was all he could say. And so not having the information that I needed to have, not to ask the right questions or how to look further or even to seek him help. The only thing I really did for him was I took him to the doctor twice, but I took him to prove to him there was nothing wrong with him so he'd go to school. Hey, your blood work's fine, you got to go to school. Like, so I'll start driving you. And I did. The problem was on a Saturday morning when I had to leave to go on a business trip, I walked into his room to say goodbye to him about 6 a.m. and I shook him awake and he had tears in his eyes. I said, when I get back, we'll figure this stuff out. And I took the trip to Vancouver. I got the phone call the next day. It was my wife. And she says, Jeff is dead. And he had gone underneath my bed and gotten the shotgun out of his case. So in that phone call, that's a moment when everybody fears, where you just know, surreal, and you want to take a step back and go, no, and just put time backwards, and you can't do it. It's too late. I flew immediately home. First thing I did is I went to the morgue because I had to make sure that it was not an accident, if that's what the case was, and it wasn't. It was not a very pretty sight. And so at that point right there, I just wanted to die. I wanted to die. The problem is, I know how it feels now when somebody takes their life and you're the survivor. When I jumped out of the car, I was actually thinking people would be better off without me. That's how I felt. That's how worthless I felt. They'll be better off without me. Right now I know that's not true. And so what do you do? I didn't know what to do. I can't kill myself because I know what it feels like. So I'll just be numb. And I had tools. I had tools for it. I had lots of Vicodins I could get my hands on because of injuries. I had an ongoing bottle of Xanax, that started off with getting me through the funerals, that I continued to take and not correctly. And then I had, alcohol, which has always been fun in my life, but all of a sudden now it became a tool for something different, which was just to be numb. And I did that for a period of time. So as I worked through that and I was numb, I wasn't thinking about my daughter, who was 7 years old, in the next room when the gun went off. I wasn't thinking about my wife, who showed up and had to deal with all this stuff. And what's going on now, all I was just numb. And so it went that way for a while. And I will say, fortunately now, looking back on it, didn't feel like this way at the time. I got pulled over for a DUI. And I got pulled over, and of course the judge was a good guy. He gives me all these different options that you can do, right, for probation. I didn't do any of them. I didn't care. It came to a point where he got tired of throwing me in for a weekend, and then for 3 days, and then for 5 days trying to make a point with me. He realized that I'm past that point, and just gave me the rest of the time. So I did 58 days over here in Oakland County Jail. And when I went in, I was happy. Not happy about being in jail, but happy I didn't have to deal with anything else. Just I could be over in this corner in my cell and be numb. And that's what I did. I didn't allow anybody to come and see me. Towards the end, your dad came and saw me. Didn't allow anybody to come and see me for this point in time, not family, not friends, nobody. At some point in time, when all of a sudden there's a little switch that flips, and I got curious, problem solving. I got curious, well, who else is in this common area with me? Because all the cells, they all faced inwards, and this middle is like a common area, right? And I wanted to know. So I started walking around, and I started listening to some of their stories. And I was perplexed by, we're all in jail, and everybody has a story why that they shouldn't be here. All these different excuses. And the one that really hit me hardest was these 4 people that were playing cards, and the one guy was explaining to the other 3 guys, the reason why he's in jail. And he says, I'm here because this chicken shit cop pulled me over because my taillight wasn't working. I went, you're in jail because it's your 3rd DUI. I go, that's why you're here. And at that moment, and I think, when you talk about, substance use and stuff, where somebody, there's finally the point when they hit bottom and they realize it, that they can also have a choice in what they do next. And that was me, because I looked at this guy and I said, I do not want to be this guy. He has no accountability, no responsibility at all. He's blaming this on somebody else. And I said, is that me? I'm here because my son died, so that's my excuse for being here. I do not want that. More than that, I don't want to be his legacy, and I certainly don't want to be mine. I want answers, okay? I want to know what's going on. And so when I got out, I started doing suicide prevention. That was the first thing at the top of my mind, was I want to save lives. And so I got trained in assist, I got trained in QPR, I got trained in Yellow Ribbon at the time that was around, and I wanted to be able to save a life. Didn't take me very long. And I ran into a doctor by the name of John Graydon, University of Michigan, head of psychiatry. He's now the national chair of the National Network of Depression Centers. But he invited me over to a lunch and learn over at U of M, right? Do you guys, I know most of you know what a lunch and learn is, but there's some that probably don't, right? Okay, I didn't know either. I just heard lunch. So I went to this lunch and learn, and I'm sitting there, and I remember the doctors in a lunch and learn, the doctors got up and they started talking about, their specialty, and they were talking about depression, and they're talking about the symptoms and the brain chemistry behind it. And my jaw hit the ground. I go, oh my gosh. I go, that's me. That's my son. In fact, you know what? That's my mom when I was a kid. My dad would say she's having one of her spells. That's that. And then I got angry. Why aren't we talking about this stuff? You sit there and you have this information. It would have been nice to know a few years ago, right? So I got a little bit upset, and I started pestering them and hanging around and bothering them, and they end up hiring me as an outreach person. So it was interesting because I didn't have any idea what I was getting myself into. I went to this 8-week mini medical school on depression, and that they had offered. But I remember my first day that they hired me, and I walked in, and Dr. Graydon walks up, and I said, okay, so what does an outreach person do? And he goes, You tell me, you're the outreach person. So anyway, there was no game plan for it. What it evolved into was getting messages out, trying to reach populations, to try and get as much information as possible, to try and get them to clinicians, try and get them for self-care, try and get them to take care of themselves. And so what it morphed into basically was this going out and doing kind of like what I'm doing today. But there's another component of it, which is if I just go and I'm going to talk to depressed people, that's only 25%. That's a high number, but it's still only 25%. I want to talk about something that we all can utilize. And so when I start talking about our own populations, it's really hard to target and get into them and so it makes some sense. But if I talk about something that everybody wants, we all want to be healthy. So let's talk about mental fitness. Let's talk about something we all can apply to, right? And so, so that's where I'm at today. And our stories, they shape us. They do. We all have our stories. They shape us, but they don't define us, okay? What defines us is what we do about them, right? And so the underlying theme is there is treatment that's available, but we have to, early detection, we have to get to it. That means we got to bust the stigma, but also means we have to refine some of the treatments that we have because they keep getting better and better and better. If you talk to somebody who went for treatment, 10 years ago, as opposed to today, it's miraculous how different it is, okay? And so we have, even the physical fitness portion of it, to try and maintain your health works because it shows in research, it's just as good as some of the depression medications, the SSRIs anyway. And so so let's do these things, right? Because we have talk therapies and we got medications, and the medications are getting better and better and better. There's a couple companies out there today that we started utilizing with some of our patients, and even myself, which was just a cheek swab, and it comes back the DNA profile of what pharmacology. I'm trying to think of this. The medicines used for depression and whether it's stabilizers or it's mood enhancers or it's the the SSRIs and all those things. But anyway, what it does, do you metabolize them? The medications for pain. Okay, which ones do you have a higher propensity to be addicted to than not be addicted to? So we can target better. And sure enough, I got this printout and I looked, and the first time I went through medicine trials, it took me 3 times, and that's like a course of a year and a half to finally get the medication that worked for me. And here it is. I got a printout and it says the first 2 I tried were on that list. This says you'll have adverse effects too, and the one that was on this list. I'm not saying this is like the gold of everything should be around it, but it's information, it's new stuff, and so it's getting better all the time. Treatments for treatment-resistant depression is even available. So what can we do as individuals? We can reach in and understand, who we are, and then we can reach out if we need to. And that's up to us, But we're not alone. Okay, there's support and there's people out there that can help. And one thing I want to bring up, if we're talking about somebody who's not going to give information forward because maybe they're down that pathway and they feel like a burden, So how do we help somebody like that? First of all, we have to identify them. That's the hardest part. And the thing about that portion of it is we've got great tools as human beings, and it's called empathy. We're mirror neurons, we're wired in this way. So if I look at somebody, I can actually kind of feel them, right? That's how we learn. It's like if you yawn over here, it'll spread, okay? So please don't yawn, okay? But if you laugh over here, it'll spread too, By the way, that's why comedians, they'll put a really good laugher in the middle of the audience because they know this guy going, oh, it'll spread. It makes the comedian's job so much easier, right? But we are connected. The thing is, we have to use it because of when we meet somebody brand new, if somebody brand new walks up and introduces themselves to you, we check them out, right? We look at them, check them out head to toe, how are they going to fit in my life, or are they going to fit in my life, friend or foe, what is it? But the people we see every day, we don't do that to. We get used to seeing them, right? And the best example I can give you, and I use this one because it's true, first of all, but it's just so obvious. I came home and I was home for 3 hours, right? My wife in the kitchen, down the hallway, in the kitchen, right? And I'm working on the desk right here. I passed her in the hallway going to the kitchen. I was working, I got to eat. So going back and forth, I passed her several times. Finally, after 3 hours, she finally slams her foot down. Well, what do you think? You cut your hair. Oh, she cut about this much off of her hair. It looks great. Good answer, right? It looks